This inmate revealed a secret minutes before he died. The prison tried to bury it. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button. You're about to enter a story the prison system never wanted the world to hear. The night it happened, Rikers Island was wrapped in a strange, heavy silence. The kind that makes even seasoned officers pause on their rounds. Down in the East Block infirmary, a man named Andre Keller lay on a narrow metal bed, struggling to breathe. He wasn't old. He wasn't frail. Just 40 years old, built like he'd spent most of his life lifting more than he talked. But for weeks, Andre had been sick, coughing, losing weight, begging staff for a proper medical check. He told anyone who would listen that something was wrong inside him. Something getting worse. Most didn't pay attention. In a place like Rikers, complaints were constant, and the system was always overloaded. But on that night, one officer, Lieutenant Sarah Holt, noticed something different. Andre wasn't making noise. He wasn't restless. He wasn't angry. He was quiet, too quiet. When she stepped closer, she saw his hands shaking. "Lieutenant," he whispered, barely audible. "Please. I need to tell someone, before I go." Sarah froze. His voice wasn't dramatic. It wasn't desperate. It was final. "What is it?" she asked, leaning in. Andre's eyes flicked toward the security camera in the corner and then back at her. "Turn it," he whispered. "Please. Just this once." She hesitated. Cameras were never to be moved without approval. But something in his voice, a gravity she couldn't explain, made her reach up and tilt it slightly away. "Just enough." Andre's voice cracked as he tried to speak. "I didn't die from this sickness. It started after I told them what I saw." He swallowed hard, each word a struggle. "There's something happening in the lower wing, something they don't log. Someone needs to check the old storage hall. Behind the freezer." Sarah felt her pulse spike. The old storage hall hadn't been used in years, at least on paper. "What's there?" she asked. Andre closed his eyes for a moment, gathering the last bit of strength he had left. "They brought someone in. A man. Not an inmate, not a guard. Nobody wore uniforms. They moved him at night. No names. No paperwork. I heard him asking for help." Sarah frowned. "Who is they, Andre?" He opened his eyes again, and she saw fear, real fear, cut through the exhaustion. "If I say names, I won't even make it through the night." His breathing grew shallow. "Just listen, behind the freezer, that's where it starts." Sarah leaned closer, desperate to hear the rest. But Andre's voice faded into a rasp. His fingers twitched once, then fell still. The monitor beside him let out a single long tone. Sarah stepped back in shock. She had just heard a dying man's final plea, and it wasn't a confession, an apology, or a prayer. It was an accusation. Within 2 minutes, the infirmary filled with staff. Officers moved quickly, almost too quickly, pushing her back as they pulled a curtain around the bed. A supervisor arrived, asking sharp questions and ordering everyone out. The camera she turned had already been repositioned, too fast for coincidence. Outside the infirmary doors, Sarah felt a cold weight settle in her chest. Something was wrong. Very wrong. And whatever Andre had seen, someone didn't want it surfacing. She made her way toward the lower wing, replaying his words in her mind. Behind the freezer. No paperwork. Someone asking for help. But when she reached the end of the corridor, she noticed something that made her stop dead. The old storage hall, the one supposedly unused for years, had a fresh padlock, a new metal bracket, and a camera pointing directly at it. And the timestamp blinking on the camera screen showed it had been installed just hours earlier. Her heart hammered. Someone else already knew Andre had talked. And they were sealing the place shut. What Sarah found next would unravel the prison from the inside. The lock, the ledger, and the lie. The next morning, the prison seemed louder than usual, radios buzzing, officers walking fast, administrators calling unexpected meetings. But beneath all that noise, Lieutenant Sarah Holt noticed something quieter, an uneasiness spreading through the staff like a shadow. Word of Andre Keller's death had already made its way around the blocks, but not a single officer mentioned what he said before he died. It was as if his final words had evaporated into the walls. Sarah kept her expression calm, even as her mind raced. She had barely slept. All night she replayed the image of the freshly installed padlock and camera. Someone was guarding that hallway with urgency, but why now? Why hours after Andre made his statement? During the morning briefing, Warden Grayson entered the room with a stiff smile. "Before we begin," he announced, "we've received preliminary reports about last night's medical emergency. It appears no policy failures occurred. Medical staff responded appropriately. The matter is closed." Closed. Just like that. Sarah felt her stomach twist. She looked around the room, waiting for another officer to question it. No one did. A few exchanged glances, but most kept their eyes down. In a place like Rikers, silence was sometimes the only armor. As the briefing ended, Sarah slipped out and headed straight for the administrative records office. If the old storage hall was supposed to be empty, the facility logs should show it. The clerk, a nervous man named Harold, looked surprised to see her. "I need the maintenance logs for East Block," she said. "All of them." Harold hesitated. "That storage hall hasn't been accessed in years. That's why I want the records." After a long pause, he handed her a thick binder. The entries were precise: dates, signatures, inspections. Everything looked normal, too normal. Rows and rows of identical handwriting, identical phrasing, identical timestamps spaced at perfect monthly intervals. As she flipped through the pages, a detail caught her eye. The last 5 inspections had been signed by a man who retired 8 months earlier. Her pulse jumped. Someone had forged routine entries. She leaned closer. The signature was neat, practiced, and false. "Harold," Sarah said slowly, "who updates these forms?" He swallowed. "They come from upstairs." "Upstairs, administration." Sarah closed the binder and thanked him, but the confirmation only deepened the knot in her gut. Something was being hidden, and the old storage hall was at the center of it. Before she went back to check the hallway again, she made one more stop, the infirmary. Andre's bed had already been stripped. Fresh sheets. New supplies. No sign he had ever been there. A medical form was clipped to the chart holder, a brief, clinical note stating he had suffered from progressive health complications. But something else was missing. His personal items. Every patient had a small tray of belongings, books, letters, photos. Andre's tray was gone. "Where are his things?" Sarah asked. A nurse shrugged. "Collected for storage." "What storage?" The nurse paused, then lowered her voice. "That depends who asks." Sarah left the infirmary with her jaw clenched. The more questions she asked, the faster the answers seemed to vanish. It felt like she was walking through a maze where the walls kept shifting. By midday, she made her way back toward the lower wing. She timed her approach between rounds, waiting for the hallway to clear. When she reached the heavy gray door leading to the old storage hall, she noticed something that made her freeze. The new padlock she saw last night was gone. Replaced by an older lock, rusted, weathered, and matching the outdated logs. But Sarah wasn't imagining things. She knew what she saw. Someone had swapped the locks to make everything seem normal again. She took one step closer, raising her hand to test the door. That's when she heard footsteps behind her. She spun around. It was Officer Malik Turner, a veteran guard, quiet, respected, someone she had worked with for years. But today his expression was different. Watchful. Cautious. "You shouldn't be down here, Lieutenant," he said. His tone wasn't angry, it was warning. "I'm following up on a concern," she answered. Turner looked past her at the door. Whatever you're looking for, you're not supposed to find it. Sarah stood firm. Did you work the lower wing recently? He hesitated. No. And neither did anyone else. Officially. Unofficially? He looked down the hall, then back at her. You didn't hear this from me, but a few nights ago, a transport van came through after midnight. No paperwork. No names. They brought someone inside. We weren't allowed near the lower wing. Sarah's breath shortened. Andre wasn't lying. What happened to the person they brought in? She asked. Turner shook his head. I don't know. But the warden told us to forget we ever saw it. Before Sarah could respond, an alarm sounded overhead. Officers began rushing down the corridors. Turner stepped back. Whatever's going on, you need to be careful. As he hurried away, Sarah turned back to the rusted lock. Someone wanted her to believe this door had been untouched for years. But the truth was right in front of her. Someone inside the prison was rewriting history, and they were doing it fast. And behind that locked door was the reason Andre spent his last breath trying to speak. What she found there would push the entire investigation into dangerous territory. The secret behind the freezer. The alarm that echoed through the lower wing was only a distraction, a fight 2 blocks away, nothing unusual. But to Sarah Holt, it was a reminder that time inside this place could shift without warning, giving her only moments to act. She waited until the noise settled, then stepped closer to the rusted lock on the storage hall door. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached into her pocket, pulling out a universal key officers used only in emergencies. She slid it into the lock, praying it would turn. It did. The metal clicked softly, a sound that felt far too gentle for the weight it carried. Sarah pushed the door open just enough to slip inside. The air was colder than she expected, and the hallway beyond smelled faintly of disinfectant, and something metallic. The old storage hall lights flickered on as she stepped deeper inside. There were boxes, broken equipment, and shelves covered in dust. Nothing unusual. Nothing dangerous. Nothing worth hiding. Then she remembered Andre's words. Behind the freezer, that's where it starts. At the far end of the hall stood a massive industrial freezer, unplugged, its surface covered in rust. She walked toward it, heart pounding. As she pulled the heavy door open, a stale, icy smell hit her, but the freezer was empty. Empty, except for the back panel. A metal sheet with new screws. Freshly installed. Sarah hesitated for just a moment before gripping the edge and pulling hard. The panel snapped loose, revealing a narrow opening leading into a hidden room behind the walls. Her breath caught. Inside the small chamber was a single cot, restraints bolted to the frame, and a camera mounted in the corner with the lens smashed. Papers were scattered across a small desk, torn medical charts, transfer forms with no names, lists of dates and times. Everything pointed to someone having been held here in complete secrecy. She stepped inside, scanning the room carefully. On the desk, she found something that made her skin crawl, a worn folder labeled Patient 0. It contained notes describing severe respiratory symptoms, unexplained fevers, and rapid decline, identical to what Andre Keller experienced before he died. But the pages went further. They detailed exposure tests, restricted movements, and repeated attempts to transfer the patient without official record. The last page had a chilling line handwritten at the bottom. If contamination spreads, isolate all contacts immediately. Sarah felt the room tighten around her. This wasn't just a secret cell. It was a hidden medical quarantine. And Andre had been exposed. Her mind raced. Was he patient 1? Or had he simply witnessed someone else being held here? If the prison was hiding a public health incident, it would explain the sudden lock changes, the fake logs, the missing records. It would explain why Andre's belongings disappeared overnight. It would explain why the warden wanted the case closed immediately. But another question clawed at her. Where was the original patient? A noise snapped her out of her thoughts, the sound of footsteps approaching the hall. Heavy. Fast. Not one pair, multiple. Sarah darted out of the hidden chamber, closing the freezer quietly. She slipped behind an old equipment shelf just as 3 officers entered the hall, 2 guards and Warden Grayson himself. Grayson's voice was low but firm. "Sweep it again. Make sure nothing was left behind. If anyone finds this place, the entire facility will be under investigation." One of the guards spoke. "What about Keller? Should we prepare a statement?" Grayson's reply was cold. "Keller is gone. And anyone who repeats what he said will end up exactly where he did." Sarah's pulse hammered. She had enough evidence in her pocket, copies of logs, dates, and photos she snapped quickly in the hidden room, to raise questions far outside Rikers Island. But she knew one thing clearly now: exposing this wouldn't just put her job at risk. It could destroy careers, trigger federal investigations, and reveal a crisis the prison system had buried for years. The guards moved closer, scanning the room. Sarah held her breath as their flashlights swept inches from her face. Then the radio crackled. "Emergency in North Unit. All available officers respond immediately." The 3 men rushed out. Their footsteps faded down the hall. Sarah exhaled shakily and slipped out through the storage door, locking it behind her. She walked calmly toward the exit, heart racing but steps steady. She didn't go to her office. She didn't go home. She walked straight to her car and drove off the island. By the time sunrise touched the city skyline, she was sitting in the lobby of an investigative journalist's office, a reporter known for exposing government misconduct. She placed the documents on his desk. "This can't be buried," she said. "Not this time." He opened the folder, eyes widening. "This story," he whispered, "is going to shake the entire country." Sarah didn't say a word. She just nodded. Because deep down, she knew something the warden didn't. Andre Keller hadn't died in silence. His last words were about to be heard by the world. And somewhere inside Rikers Island, behind a freezer and a rusted lock, the truth waited for the floodlights.